Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto Was the New Raikage. After succeeding in retrieving Sasuke, Naruto was banished from Konoha due to the council's fear of the Akatsuki coming after him and destroying Konoha. 10 years later, after being banished, Naruto becomes the new Raikage of Kumo and leads it to greatness. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description down below. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. Last time on Raikage. As he was drifting in and out of unconsciousness, he heard the chiming of small bells. As he looked up, he could see two figures walking in the rain heading towards him. As they got closer, even though it was dark, he could make out two things about the two people walking towards him. One, both were wearing conical straw hats with small spike-like balls hanging down to cover their faces. The other thing was, both were wearing dark cloaks with chin-high collars that also covered their faces. One word popped into his mind as he drifted into unconsciousness. Akatsuki. They had found him. 10 years later. In the middle of the ocean. Currently in the middle of the sea that separated Cha no Kuni, Tea Country, from the islands of Nagi and Oyuzu, a single royal ship belonging to the daimyo of Yumi no Kuni, Sea Country, was sailing on its way to Tsuki no Kuni, Moon Country. On board the ship was the daimyo of Yumi no Kuni, the only daughter, Princess Sachi. The princess was extremely beautiful, although she did not wear expensive clothes, jewelry, or makeup like most princesses. Instead, she wore a simple yet elegant purple kimono with red slash around her waist. She was slimly built and had long, silky raven black hair that reached down to her lower thigh, bright sky blue eyes, and had an angelic-like face. Her beauty had often won the attention of many different suitors from her own country, as well as from others, but the princess had shown no interest with any of them. Another thing about the princess was that, unlike most princesses, she did not spend her time going to parties and looking nice just to attract suitable husbands. She preferred to spend her time learning. She enjoyed reading poetry, writing, singing songs, and reading books, as well as playing with children. She wanted to learn as much as she could, so if needed be, she would be able to help rule her country. She was passionate for the peace and prosperity of her country. Even though she was not the next ruler of Yumi no Kuni, her older brother Tachihiko was, she wanted to at least contribute a bit. She did not like fighting, and believed that force should only be an absolute last resort, once all options for peace talks and communications have ended, and there is no other choice. The princess was also a very skilled diplomat, and had helped her father on several occasions during talks with other countries in terms of trade rights and other things. She was a very gifted speaker due to her passions to help people who needed it. The reason why the princess was heading to Tsuki no Kuni was because she was engaged to the crown prince of Tsuki no Kuni, Prince Tsuki Hikaru, heir to the throne of Tsuki no Kuni. Both the prince and the princess had met often over the years, and had been friends for many of those years, since both Tsuki no Kuni and Yumi no Kuni were strong allies with one another. Hikaru's grandfather, the previous king of Tsuki no Kuni, his son Tsuki Hikaru, current king of Tsuki no Kuni, as well as Hikaru himself, had often visited Yumi no Kuni when Hikaru's grandfather had business with the Yumi daimyo over ships, trade issues, or other political matters. Sachi, Tachihiko, and their father, in turn, would accompany the delegations to Tsuki no Kuni often. They would also come and visit just for a vacation, since Tsuki no Kuni was famed for being an excellent country for people on holidays. Over time, both Sachi and Hikaru had grown close with one another, often wrote letters to each other. It had been obvious that the two were falling in love. Whenever they were at the same parties, both could be usually found talking to one another or even dancing together. Eventually, Sachi's father told her and Hikaru that, at some point when the children were each 10 years old, Hikaru's grandfather, Tsuki Hikaru, suggested an arranged marriage between the two, since he believed that Sachi would be an excellent wife for his grandson, and would help him rule wisely over the people of Tsuki no Kuni. Further, such a marriage would make the alliance between their two countries even stronger. Sachi's father had agreed to this so long as, when the two were of marrying age, they agreed to the conditions also. Hikaru's grandfather, Tsuki Hikaru, had agreed, and both men signed a contract stating the agreement between the two rulers. When both the prince and princess saw the contract between Sachi's father and Hikaru's grandfather, both agreed to the contract. The wedding was to be held in Tsuki no Kuni. Sachi would have to be in Tsuki no Kuni 2 months before the wedding, so that she could help prepare for the ceremony, and prepare herself for the duties that she would take as the future queen of Tsuki no Kuni. Sachi's father, along with her brother Tachihiko, would come later on for the wedding itself to give her away. When she was leaving, Sachi's father had originally wanted her to have an entire fleet, as well as 1,000 royal guards to protect her on her way to Tsuki no Kuni, but she had battered her father down to 1 ship, 20 royal guards, and a squad of ninjas to protect her, since she did not want so many men around her all the time. Sachi's father had hired a squad of Konoha ninjas to guard her. Although Hikaru had offered to send some ninjas from the newly founded shinobi village, Tsuki no Kuni the Jitsugakur no Sato, the village hidden under in the moon, or hire ninjas from other villages, such as Kumagakure no Sato, the village hidden in the clouds, or the newly formed Heavenly Alliance, whom Tsuki no Kuni had been allied with the past 2 years, they were politely refused. Sachi's father had insisted that he use the ninja from Konoha, since he had held them in high regard, ever since a ninja from that village had saved his life many years back. As the ship sailed, the princess could be seen on deck seated down on a small stool, reading a book to pass the time. At times, she would also watch some of the ninjas from the Konoha team spar with one another to pass the time. As time passed, the princess could not help but think that the trip was becoming quite uneventful, believing nothing would happen. Oh, how wrong she was. On the bow of the ship. Currently standing at the bow of the ship looking forward was a tall, attractive raven-haired woman with bright crimson red eyes. She wore a single red sleeve and white patterned bandages with a ninja fishnet shirt underneath it. This woman was no one other than Yuhi Saratobi Kurenai, Konoha's famed genjutsu mistress, and was the team leader of this mission, which was of vital importance to Konoha, since the village had been on some hard times of late and was in growing danger from its enemies. The marriage between the princess of Yumi no Kuni and the prince Tsuki no Kuni would strengthen the already strong trade alliance between Yumi no Kuni and Tsuki no Kuni, and, if they successfully accomplished this mission, it would put Konoha in good favor with both countries. This would then allow Konoha to negotiate for a trade treaty with them, since the trade alliance between Yumi no Kuni and Tsuki no Kuni controlled all trade in the southern part of the elemental sea. Author no don't know if this is what the sea is called in Naruto, so I just calling it that. Also, if Konoha was able to get a trade treaty with them, it would give Konoha a new, much-needed source of trade and missions. Not to mention it could lead to a possible alliance between the newly founded Tsukigakur no Sato and Tsuki no Kuni. As Konoha currently needed all the allies they could possibly get. As Kurenai looked out to the endless horizon of the sea, she could not help but think of all the things that happened in the past 10 years. So much had happened and so much had changed over this period of time, and it all started when the Konoha Council had banished a certain blonde ninja. When news of Naruto's leaving the village the night before he would be officially banished from the village, caused many on the civilian part of the council to cause a fuss. They had wanted to make a spectacle out of him in front of the whole village when he was officially banished. Although the other members that had voted for Naruto to be banished did not care since, as long as he was gone, they did not care how he left. Soon after, the council then released the news that, now that Naruto was no longer a ninja or a citizen of Konoha, the law that the Sandaime Hokage made about Naruto was annulled. Now all the younger generations now knew that Naruto was a Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi. The news had received a mixed response among the younger generation. Many had followed their parents' path, and viewed Naruto as the Kyuubi in human form. Others, who had at least known Naruto in some way, did not share the older generation's view of him, and just saw him as a person who got a raw deal from the village. Others still did not know what to think of him, since they had seen the boy many times, and, other than doing pranks, he had done nothing wrong, but yet he held the Kyuubi inside him, the demon that had nearly destroyed their village. The news, of course, had the biggest effect on the members of the former Konoha 12. After hearing the news, Shino had stated that he had found a new form of respect for Naruto, considering the burden he held. Plus, he too knew what it was like to be the living host of another being. Neji himself had said that he respected Naruto even more now, for the burden that he carried was one heavier than the one he himself carried, and, in some small way, understood what Naruto went through the burden to carry Curse Seal. When Lee had heard the news, he had started shouting about how bright Naruto's flames of youth were to carry and contain such a burden like the Kyuubi in him, and still smiled all the time. He had also stated that he would work even harder now, just so that his own flames of youth could match Naruto's. As Kurenai thought of that, she could not help but chuckle at that memory of Lee, since he always was able to brighten people's mood much like Naruto used to do. When Hinata heard the truth about Naruto, she had cried harder than she ever had, only now knowing how much Naruto must have gone through in his life carrying his burden, and never once had she tried to help him. She had cried most of the day after Naruto left, since she had been the first one to find out that Naruto had left the village before she could say goodbye to him. She had also confessed in private to Kurenai that she had gone over to Naruto's apartment to tell him how she felt about him, only to find that he had left. When Hinata told Kurenai this, Kurenai felt her heart go out to the poor girl, as she could only imagine what the girl was going through at the time. Even with the news of Naruto being a Jinchuriki, the opinion of Naruto to most of the other members of the Konoha 12 did not change, they all considered him their friend. The same was said by Konohamaru and his friends. The only members of the Konoha 12 that had anything bad to say about Naruto were Ino, much to her father's disappointment, and Sakura. They had taken the view of believing that Naruto was a demon, while Sasuke boasted when he heard the news that he knew that the dope couldn't have beaten him without some help, and saying that if it wasn't for the Kyuubi's chakra Naruto would never have beaten him. To which Shikamaru had put him down a peg or two by telling him it still didn't change the fact that Naruto still defeated him, and it wasn't any different than when Sasuke had used the power of the cursed seal that he got from Orochimaru. This, of course, shut up the boy for a while. When the news of Naruto's banishment had been released to the civilian and ninja population, there had been a great deal of celebration by the civilians and many ninja, mainly Chunin and a few Jonin level ninja, but that had been quickly put down by Tswand, having many of them arrested and put in holding cell for a few days for disturbing the peace. When the civilian council tried to object to Tswand's actions trying to stop the celebration of Naruto banishment, Tswand quickly put them down, stating that they were still under a state of emergency, and that there were to be no celebration at any time until the state of emergency had ended. The civilian council could do nothing about this since Tswand was well in her rights to do so during such times. Not long after the news of Naruto's banishment and being a Jinchuriki came out, Konoha fell under attack by a series of daily pranks at the hands of Konohamaru and his friends. These pranks lasted an entire year before Konohamaru and his team graduated from the academy. The pranks were often and always varied. The pranks ranged from having sticky flour bombs exploding in clothes stores, stink bombs exploding in food stores, and sticky bubblegum bombs exploding into several different shops and on people. A large number of cockroaches were also let loose in a restaurant, and all the Inuzuka's kennels were opened and their dogs released. That is, after spraying several people with dog pheromone. Let's not forget the paint bombs exploding in certain people's homes. One of the worst pranks was when, at some point, the civilians tried to celebrate Naruto banishment. Konohamaru and his team built a catapult and used old dirty baby diapers from the baby's ward in the hospital as ammo. Needless to say, the celebrations did not last long, and many people had to go home and scrub themselves down hard. Most of these pranks were aimed at the civilian population as well as others who had either been cruel to Naruto in some way or another. A lot of Konohamaru's pranks had also been aimed at the council members that had banished Naruto. Kurenai could not help but smile when she remembered all the pranks that Konohamaru and his team had done, some being with council member Koharu, who had been legged fucked by 2 Inuzuka dogs, one at each leg, and had to try and walk to the hospital as they were doing her. It had taken most of the day trying to get the dogs off her. Another prank was when Yuden had somehow set off a stink bomb in the council room while it was in session. It had taken several days before the smell in the council room had cleared enough for it to be used again. Mogi achieved something special when she had switched Sakura's shampoo with instant quick-drying glue when she was in the Kunoichi shower room. The girl's hands were stuck to her head and, to further humiliate her, Mogi had tricked her into walking out to the street naked, where she had to run all the way home in her birthday suit. In the end, Sakura's mother had to cut off several large bits of her hair to get her hands free, which resulted with Sakura having several bald parts on her head, and her hands now had a light pink coating. Needless to say, Sakura had not been seen by anyone for a few weeks. Konohamaru and his team had even somehow gotten the Chunins Izumo and Katetsu to help them in their pranks, where later on Karini found out that they had been friends with Naruto and loved his pranks. With the 2 Chunins' help, they set up a bubblegum bomb in council member Hoho Akira's office. When he entered, it blew up causing Akira to be stuck to his office wall. It wasn't until the next day that they were finally able to get him off the wall, but they had to shave his head bald, since his hair was completely covered in bubblegum, not to mention he was covered in sore marks and scratches from the bubblegum being pulled off him. The next person to be hit had been Kakashi. Izumo and Kotetsu had told him of an excellent bar called the Blue Oyster that they had found in the village, and that it served top-notch steak for cheap prices. When Kakashi went to it, he found out that it was gay bar, and, what was worse, the night he went was when the Hatake Kakashi fanboy club was having their annual meeting. Needless to say, Kakashi's girly screams were heard all over the village for the early part of the night. When they had finally caught him, the fanboy club had spent the rest of the night dancing the tango dance with Kakashi. They even had all taken turns to dance with the copycat ninja. To add insult to injury, Izumo and Kotetsu had somehow gotten photos of Kakashi's dances with each of the members of his fanboy club, and made copies of them all, and posted them all over the village for everyone to see. This even also got the attention of many yaoi fangirls. Needless to say, Kakashi found it very hard to walk down the street with certain men and women, eyeing him in a way that freaked him out. Thinking of that time caused Kurenai to chuckle at Kakashi's suffering, since in her mind he deserved it. Another council member that had been targeted was Ashikaga Shin. He had several skunks secretly placed inside his briefcase, and when he opened it, well, needless to say, no one was willing to do business with him, or even to stay with him in the same room for a week or two. That is, everyone except for the Ramen chief Tenchi, who, one day, saw Shin and punched him in the nose, breaking it, along with giving him 2 matching black eyes. Ino was then later hit by pranksters, where they secretly switched her bubble bath liquid with green dye, so that when she looked at herself in the mirror, the whole village heard a reaction. It had taken 3 weeks before the dye finally wore off her. The running joke during this time that many of the Konoha 12 members repeated was that she would at least match the gardens and flowers in her family's store. Not only that, it would also improve her stealth skills in the forest. These jokes had infuriated the young girl to no end, as they happened daily and often. Sasuke was yet another person to suffer from the unending pranks. The youngsters had slipped a sleeping pill in his food at some point, and somehow, in a single night, painted Sasuke's entire house pink, both inside and out, as well as the floor and roof. They had even filled the rooms with various women's sex toys that would also be used by certain types of men, as well as many frilly things. They even went so far as to dye his hair pink as he slept and threw out all his normal clothes, and replaced them with tight-fitting shirts that said, "Gay chi has rule, I love to fuck men, or kiss me I'm gay." They also put in tight-fitting hot pants, and his underwear had been switched with pink frilly girly underwear, with pictures of hearts and teddy bears. They even went so far as to put in some clothes that were pink versions of Lee jumpsuit. The next morning everyone heard the Uchiha's cries of rage and horror, and had seen the young Uchiha walking around the streets wearing a pink shirt that said, "Gay Uchiha's rule," a pair of hot pants, where people saw a bit of the frilly underwear, with hearts sticking out a bit of the hot pants, as well as his new hair color, as he walked around the village, ordering new clothes, and having his home refurbished, which altogether took several days. Also during that time, the young Uchiha heir had gained a great deal more attention from his fanboy club, much to his annoyance, where many were sending letters of proposals of marriage to him and undying love, as well as several pictures of them in various outfits, much to the young Uchiha horror. The Kurama clan had their clan compound packed by the Konohamaru gang at one night, where toilet roll could be found all over the place on every home in the compound. Council member Asai Haida was then hit later on by Konohamaru and his friends and their Chunin allies, where they infested Haida's new family home with dozens of rats and mice, and hundreds of cockroaches, termites, spiders and other various creepy crawlies. By the time Haida realized that his home had been infested by these creatures, they were all over his house. It cost Haida a fortune to get rid of all the insects and vermin, considering the fact that more had gotten in and the mansion and their population was so large that it took months to get the job done. He had to wait even longer since the termites and the other vermin had done a lot of damage to the interlayer of the mansion, resulting in the mansion being condemned and then completely refurbished from top to bottom. He even had to buy all new furniture, since the vermin had ruined it all. Altogether, the entire ordeal had cost Haida a very sizable amount of his money where, from what Kurenai had heard, he had cried like a baby when he found out how much money it would cost him. Haida was not the only one to suffer from a lose of a get deal of money. Because of Konoha pranksters, Konohamaru and the others had somehow gathered an army of over 1,000 hungry rabbits, to which to this day no one had figured out how they gathered all the rabbits, and let them loose on Imako Taichi's fields and crops. The rabbits practically ate all of Taichi's crops, costing him an entire year's worth of profits, and it had cost his a very pretty penny to get rid of all the rabbits and replant all the crops. Later on it was said that he had thrown quite a hissy fit over it all. The Hyuga clan was soon hit afterwards, with probably the biggest prank ever played in Konoha. Somehow, Konoha had broken into the Hyuga compound and stolen all the Hyuga clan's underwear, from boxers and briefs to bras, knickers and thongs, and proceeded to hang them up all over the village, from trees to flagpoles, and from rooftops to the middle of the street. Kurenai did not think it was possible for any Hyuga, other than Hinata, to blush as much from embarrassment, but on that day, she had been proven wrong when the entire Hyuga clan had to go around the whole village, picking up their unmentionables in front of everyone. Many of the Hyuga clan members had blushes on their faces that rivaled Hinata's, as they picked up their various things. Hiashi himself had to go up to the tallest flagpost atop of the Hokage Tower, to get his boxers down, that were flying on the flagpost like flags for all the village to see. As he did so, the Hyuga clan head's face was so red from embarrassment and rage, that it put any color that Hinata had ever showed as shame. The only Hyugas that had not been hit by Konohamaru's prank were Neji, Hinata and Hinata's younger sister Hanabi. Kurenai could not keep herself from laughing at the prank on the Hyuga clan that day. Since they had been made the laughing stock of the entire village, Asuma had even told her that during several council meetings, Tsume could not look at Hiashi without busting out laughing, while the other clan heads snickered and laughed at the Hyuga clan. Even the stoic Shibi and the silent Anbu commander were heard chuckling at Hiashi's humiliation. Kurenai remembered when she and Asuma asked Konohamaru how he did it. The young boy had just smiled and said, "A true prankster never reveals his secrets." About a month after Naruto banishment, Uchiha Sasuke had his trial for trying to leave the village to join one of Konoha's mortal enemies, the Snake Sanin Orochimaru. During the trial, the civilian council members hired the top litigators in Konoha to defend the Uchiha's case. They had stated that Sasuke's judgment was impaired when he left the village, due to the fact of the mental trauma that he suffered when the Uchiha clan had been massacred, combined with the effect that the curse seal that Orochimaru put on him. Hence, Sasuke could not be held responsible for his actions at the time, since it had been proven that the curse seal can affect a person's mind or judgment at times. The example being Anko with her memory loss, and his teammate Haruno Sakura reports that Sasuke was not himself when he first used the curse seal, when he had awakened from his battle with Orochimaru in the Forest of Death. Although some did argue that, if the Uchiha's mental state was in question, then he should no longer be a ninja, the litigators countered by stating that Jiraiya had sealed up the curse seal himself when Sasuke was returned to the village, and there was no danger of Sasuke leaving. They also argued that Konoha could not afford to be seen weak now, since it had not been long after the invasion of Suna, and Odo and Konoha needed the Uchiha clan, so they could still be seen as being strong. No one could really argue against that statement. Altogether, the trial had been a complete farce as far as many ninjas saw it, since it was clear that the civilians were on the Uchiha's side, and, if he had been properly punished like he should have been, the civilian would cause havoc over him, and would riot over him, weakening Konoha further. It was soon decided that Sasuke would not be executed or sent to prison for trying to defect from the village, and he would be allowed to stay a ninja. However, he would not be allowed to be promoted for 3 years. He would also have a tracking seal put on him by Jiraiya once he returned to the village, and until said time, he would be under house arrest, and would have Anbu watching him at all times, until he had proven himself to be a loyal ninja. He was also not allowed to leave the village by himself under any condition, and, if he did have to leave, he would have to be accompanied by 1, 2 or 3 Jonin ninjas. Further, he was also forbidden from using the curse seal, no matter what the situation, and if he did he would be killed on the spot without trial. When the civilians' council members heard the last ruling they tried to object, but Swan had shot them down, since Sasuke was a ninja of Konoha again and was under her ruling, and he had to be punished for trying to leave the village, no matter what his excuse was. The civilians' council members knew that they could not fight the last ruling, since it was within her power to do so, plus Danzo, Kaheru, and Hamura were all in agreement with Swan's ruling, hence without their support, the civilian members stood no chance of overruling her. Even with the punishment, many ninjas saw this as nothing but a slap on the wrist, and were angered by this, since they knew that they could not get away with what the Uchiha had done, and yet he had. Although Sasuke himself may have found Tsunade ruling insulting to him and it may have angered him, it did not change the fact to many ninjas that he was getting off far too easily. About 3 months after Naruto's banishment, Jiraiya returned to the village planning to take Naruto on a training trip. At the time he had not known or heard of Naruto's banishment, since he had left the village right before the council had banished Naruto. But when he did hear of it from Swan, he went ballistic and had tried to attack the council members that had Naruto banished. It took Tsunade and over a dozen Anbu members to hold Jiraiya back from killing them. Soon after, they were able to calm Jiraiya down enough so that he would not try and kill the council members. After he had calmed down, Jiraiya had stated that he was going to find Naruto, but the council stopped him, stating that they would not allow it. When Jiraiya told them they could not stop him since he was a ninja and answered only to the Hokage, Konoha had countered by stating that if he went to Naruto, he would interfere with their plan to deal with the Akatsuki, and since it was dealing with the safety of the village, they did have the power to order him from going to Naruto. When Jiraiya asked what their plan was, she simply gave him the same answer they gave Swan, that since he was so emotionally attached to Naruto, it would risk their operation, but they would tell them all when the time was right. When council member Hoho Akira had suggested that Jiraiya train Sasuke, Jiraiya had punched him in the gut and sent him flying across the room, saying, "You may be able to stop me from finding Naruto, but you will never be able to force me to ever train that traitorous little brat," and then left the room. Kurenai had then later on heard from Shizune that Jiraiya still went and tried to find Naruto through his contacts and sources, as well as through the Toad Summon contract that Jiraiya had allowed Naruto to sign. Unfortunately, no one of Jiraiya's contacts or sources could find Naruto, and the Toad Summons had told him that although they knew Naruto was alive at the time due to the connection he had with the Toad Summons, for some reason they were unable to track him and find where he was or even reverse summon him to them. 4 months after Naruto's banishment, the news had spread to other countries. When certain countries and villages heard it, they were furious, to say the very least. When Nami no Kuni, Wave Country, learned of Naruto's banishment, they were furious beyond words, with the hero of their country being banished for something that was not his fault. They then sent a message to Konoha stating that they were annulling the trade treaty that they had recently made, and were ceasing any and all trade with Konoha, and that all merchant and transport ships that were controlled by Nami no Kuni would refuse to work or trade with Konoha. Also, any and all mission that Nami no Kuni would have originally given to Konoha would now be given to Suna. This had, of course, caused Konoha a great deal of trouble since Nami no Kuni was strategically positioned for trade with Konoha, the fire country with other important countries. What was worse was, when the tyrant business's Mangata was killed, the people of Nami no Kuni took over his shipping company, giving them major control over the central elemental sea trading industry. Such a blow would severely hurt Konoha's economic structure. Asuma had told Kurenai that when Ashikaga Shin and Umako Taichi heard Nami no Kuni's message, they made perfect imitations of wide-eyed gaping fish, as they realized how much this would hurt their businesses. Konoha had sent 3 different delegations to try and reopen negotiations with Nami no Kuni. Unfortunately, all 3 delegations were kicked out as soon as they arrived. The last one was even given a message from the representative of Nami no Kuni to Zuna, which said, "If any Konoha ninja or person ever sent foot here to Nami no Kuni again, he or she will be sent back in a box, and we will then place a full embargo on your village." This, of course, had got the desired effect from Konoha, and they had stopped trying. The next country to act was Cha no Kuni, Tea Country. The leader of the Wasabi clan, Jiracho, used his influence over the daimyo of Cha no Kuni to send all his missions to Suna instead of Konoha. Since Jiracho was said to have had been impressed by the boy when he met him the few times he did, he was very grateful to Naruto for helping to deal with the Wagarashi clan, and helping them to win the shrine race. He had also known how important Naruto was to Swan, and knew she did not want him to be banished. He had also forbid all trade with Konoha in Degarashi port, which was an important trading place for Konoha, like with Nami no Kuni. This too had hurt Konoha greatly since Cha no Kuni was a very important client of Konoha's, and its loss meant losing a lot of valuable missions and money. Another country to react badly to Naruto's banishment was Haruyuki no Kuni, Spring Snow Country. When the lady daimyo Kazuhana Koyuki had heard what had happened, she had been beyond anger with Konoha. She, herself, went to Konoha along with 200 of her samurai and 12 Yonki ninjas, and demanded a meeting with both the Hokage and the council. She ranted for 20 minutes about how furious she was with them at banishing the hero of Yuki no Kuni over their simple hatred of the Kyuubi. After which, she informed them that she was annulling Konoha's alliance with both Haruyuki no Kuni and Yukigakure no Sato, the village hidden in the snow, which she had allowed to be maintained under the control of a few ninjas that had been loyal to her father before her uncle took control. She also annulled the technology trade agreement with Konoha, where Haruyuki no Kuni was planning on sharing some of its advanced technology with Konoha, as well as annulling all other trade agreements with them. This had, of course, greatly hurt Konoha, since many members of the council, especially members like Danzo and Kaheru, were almost drooling over the ideas of having weapons like chakra armor and the volley guns, and using them to strengthen Konoha. The council tried to persuade Lady Koyuki from annulling both the alliances with her country and village, and annulling the trade agreements, but she would not budge. She even told Jiraiya that she refused to star in the Icha Paradise movie, and that she would have some of her friends in the movie industry make sure that it would never be made, which caused the super pervert and Kakashi, when he heard, to each have 3 simultaneous heart attacks. Lady Koyuki soon after left the village, not wanting to stay in it any longer. Soon after that, Shibuki, leader of Takagakure no Sato, the village hidden in the waterfall, arrived in the village with 2 squads of Jonin ninjas, demanding a meeting with the Hokage. From what Shizune had told Kurenai, Shibuki had been greatly angered by what Konoha had done, simply because Naruto was a Jinchuriki. He had also stated that he had become disgusted at the way they had treated a good friend of his, especially one that had taught him how to be a real leader for his people, not to mention that Naruto was a hero to his people, since he had saved them from the rogue Taki Jonin ninja Suyin and his followers, from taking over his village, and stealing the hero water from them. He also stated that he and his people would never have treated their Jinchuriki Fu like that, since he stated that his people think Fu as a protector and friend to their village. Shibuki then informed Tsunade that he and the Takagakure Council and the villagers of Takagakure had agreed to annul their alliance between their villages, since they wanted no part of Konoha. After saying his piece, he then left. This too left Konoha in a weakened state, since with the alliance with Taki gone as well as Yuki, that left Suna as Konoha's only shinobi ally. Of course, soon enough, that too changed. Almost a year after Naruto's banishment, Suna announced its new Kazukage, Sabaku no Gara, Gara of the Sand, the Jinchuriki of the Shukaku the Chibi, the one-tailed beast. When Gara first heard of what had happened, he had been so greatly angered by what happened to Naruto, that he left the village for the day, and unleashed his anger and fury, by creating a massive sandstorm, that spread out over 20 miles in length, from what Kurini had heard from a few Suna ninjas. Gara knew at the time there was not much he could do, but when he became Kazukage, he caused several painful political headaches for Konoha and its council. He, like many others, also took apart the treaty between Konoha piece by piece, until the only thing left was the treaty between the 2 villages, where both sides would help each other in a time of war, but only if it affected both villages. Even though both Suna and Konoha were still allies, the relationship between the villages was very tense to say the least, especially since Suna was regaining its former strength, and received new funding from their daimyo, and getting new missions from Cha no Kuni and Nami no Kuni. A year after Naruto had been banished, there had still not been any sign of Naruto anywhere, although Jiraiya had still confirmed from the toads that he was still alive somewhere. Kurenai remembered during that time not much had changed in the village, other than when she and Asuma had gotten married. But soon after they had married, news had arrived about Naruto. When finishing a mission, a team of Jonins had found what looked to have been a battle in a clearing of a forest. Trees had fallen, and scorch marks were on the ground as well as holes. But the most notable things that they found were black flames around the clearing that would not go out, even with the water jutsu sprayed on it, and a torn piece of a black cloak with the red clouds on it, along with some blood on it, and a badly ripped orange jacket, also covered in a large amount of blood. When the team returned what they found to Tsunade, she immediately had the blood on the cloak and the blood on the jacket compared with certain samples. When the testing was done, it had proven everyone's worst fears true. The blood on the cloak was Uchiha Itachi's blood, and the blood on the jacket was Naruto's blood, which confirmed that the Akatsuki had captured Naruto. Tsunade had quickly called Jiraiya to her office and hired to form a recovery team and a tracking team, in hopes of tracking the Akatsuki, before they extracted the Kyuubi from Naruto. Kurenai remembered that day well, since she, herself, had been on the team along with Kasukahi, Asuma and Guy. Since they all were among Konoha's top shinobi, and had experience fighting with at least 2 of the Akatsuki members. But before they left, Danzo and Koharu had stopped them, stating that, if they left they would ruin their plan to destroy the Akatsuki. It was at this point that Swan and Jiraiya demanded to know their plan to deal with the Akatsuki. The 2 elders then explained that when Naruto was being given the seals to stop him from using his chakra, and keep him from telling anyone about Konoha, he was also given another seal that Danzo had some of his top seal masters create a seal that would be put over the seal that the Yondai Mei created to seal up the Kyuubi. Danzo's seal would only activate when the Kyuubi was being extracted from him by the Akatsuki, and once that happened, Danzo's seal would cause all of the Kyuubi's chakra to come out all at once, causing a massive explosion that, according to the seal master's calculations, would destroy anything from a 5 to 10 mile radius. which would destroy the Akatsuki, and then Konoha would claim to have destroyed the Akatsuki by using a new weapon to do it, where the other villages would then fear to attack Konoha for fear that they would use that weapon against them. They also informed Swan and Jiraiya that they need not bother trying to find them, since if the Akatsuki had indeed captured Naruto, then they would have already began to extract the Kyuubi from Naruto, and it would be too late for them to stop it. Kurenai scowled as remembered, when Danzo and Himeru had explained their plan, it made her sick at how they would use an innocent boy in such a way. Kurenai also remembered Tsunade's and Jiraiya's reaction to the news, since once Swan and Jiraiya had heard the plan they went ballistic, and it took both the tracking team and the recovery team, as well as 50 Anbu, that had arrived once they felt Jiraiya's and Swan's killing intent, to hold them both back from killing the two elders. Not that Kurenai or several others weren't tempted to do so, and even joining them in killing the two elders. Soon after, both Sannin stopped trying to kill the elders, knowing that it would do no good, after which they just broke down and cried. About a week after finding Naruto's blooded jacket, there had been no sign of any kind of explosion or reports of one. This, of course, caused a great deal of concern among the council, since they had been informed of Danzo and Koharu's plan after Tsunade and Jiraiya had been told. When they learned this, most of the clan heads as well as Hamura had openly glared at the two elders, since they did not agree with what they did. Even the two elders had begun to get concerned with no sign or reports of explosion. It was not until Jiraiya asked the Toad Summons about Naruto that they had informed them that Naruto was dead, since the contract with them had expired. This left two possible outcomes. One, during the battle Itachi might have accidentally killed Naruto with his Amaterasu, or the more likely one was that the Akatsuki had found Danzo's seal and removed it before they extracted the Kyuubi from him. But it did not matter, Danzo and Koharu's plan had failed, and Naruto was dead. Jiraiya left the village a few days later for a while, since he found it too painful to stay at the time, while Tsunade locked herself in her office for several hours, where people all over the village could hear her crying at the loss of Naruto. When word got out to the villagers and other ninja that the demon was dead, they started celebrating, crying out, the demon was dead, but the party had not lasted long. When a teary-eyed Tsunade heard the celebrations, she went down to the village square where the celebrations were happening, and struck her fist right into the ground, and caused the ground to shake, and a fissure appeared in the middle of the village square, stopping all celebrations. After which, Tsunade then released a massive amount of killer intent on the fools, in which she told the fools that if there were any more celebration of Naruto's death, or if she caught anyone trying to celebrate Naruto's death, she would rip off their reproductive system, whether it be man or women, and then make sure that they would never choose solid food again either. After which, she let loose more killer intent to make her point clear, where she then went back to her office to be alone with her sorrow. When Kurenai thought of that day, she could not help but be saddened. She remembered when she, Asuma, and Guy went to tell Hinata and the others the news about Naruto's death. Kakashi had told them that they could tell the kids, since he had said to them that he had to go to the memorial stone. When the Konoha 12 heard about Naruto, most of them had been greatly upset at what happened. Tenten had openly cried for her friend, as did Kiba and Choji. Others like Shino, Shikamaru and Eiji showed no real emotions, other than lowering their heads, since they preferred to keep such emotions bottled up inside, and release them when they were alone. Lee had even stopped being himself for a few days, and had hardly even said a word, which showed how much it affected him. Konohamaru and his team started to cry the moment they heard. Konohamaru had refused to accept it at first, but the proof could not be denied. Even Sakura and Ino were said to have been upset at Naruto's death, since after about 6 or 8 months since Naruto was banished, the girls slowly began to change. According to Asuma, Ino had changed due to a fight that she had with Shikamaru, when she had insulted Naruto in front of him, after which he had smacked her in the face, and had told her how stupid she was. Shikamaru then went into a rant about how Naruto had been a loyal ninja to the village as well as a hero, but was treated like shit by idiotic fools like her. He even told her about how useless she was at being a ninja, and that she should quit if she didn't wake up soon, since she spent her whole time dieting, and make herself look good for Sasuke, who would properly never look at her in any other way than a foolish fangirl. He also told her that if she didn't start to act like a serious ninja and start to get stronger, she'd get herself and the rest of them killed when they try to protect her, or she would get herself raped by enemy ninja. When he had finished, Ino had broken into tears and ran home due to the truth and harshness of Shikamaru's words. Fortunately, soon afterwards Ino came back and asked her and Asuma as well as her father for training, wanting to get stronger. Also, according to Shizune, Kurenai had heard that Sakura had also changed due to a verbal beating that Tsunade gave her when she was training her in medical ninjutsu, since Sakura had already started training with Tsunade before Naruto's banishment, and had nearly stopped training her when she heard what Sakura had said and done to Naruto. According to Shizune, during the training with Tsunade, where she had been harsh and very strict on Sakura in it, Sakura had made a mistake that might have killed a patient, where Swan then gave her a harsh talking to about it. This of course caused Sakura to yell back at Tsunade, stating that she was blaming her for Naruto being banished, and stating that he was a danger to the village, and that they were better off without him. This of course had not gone over well with Tsunade when Sakura had finished, since from what Shizune told Kurenai, Tsunade had grabbed the girl by the neck and slammed her against the wall, and started to squeeze her neck, nearing choking her, after which Tsunade then gave her a similar but harsher verbal beating than Shikamaru gave Ino, in which, according to Shizune, Tsunade had broken all the deluded beliefs that Sakura had built up for herself and broken Sakura from the inside. After which Tsunade threw her out of the room and told not to come back until she seen how stupid she had been. A few days later, Sakura came back into Tsunade's office and went on her hands and knees and begged for forgiveness, and telling Tsunade she had realized how much of a blind stupid girl she had been and wanted to get stronger so that she could fix the mistakes that she had made, one day find Naruto and help find a way to bring Naruto back and beg his forgiveness. After hearing Sakura's heartfelt apology and seeing how sincere Sakura had been, Swan took Sakura back, but had her train twice as hard as she had before, to which Sakura did not complain about. Kurenai had also heard that when both girls heard about Naruto's death, both had wept, since neither of them had got a chance to apologize to Naruto for what they had done to him and try in some small way to make it up to him. Both the ramen chief Tenchi and his daughter Aim were also distraught at the news of Naruto's death. When they heard, they even closed down their store for several days due to their grief. Soon after, they reopened their stand and had a large picture of Naruto hung on their wall of their stand as a small monument to Naruto. They then even created a new ramen dish that they named after Naruto, the Uzumaki Supreme Ramen Special. It was also common knowledge among the villagers that no one was ever to speak bad about Naruto in front of them, especially Aim. This unwritten law was created when one villager who had been having a meal at the ramen stand actually tried to take it down and smash the photo of Naruto, stating that they shouldn't have the picture of the demon around. Unfortunately for said villager, when Aim caught him at what he was trying to do, she attacked him, where she then gave him the beating of all beatings that was so bad it could only be matched by the one Tsunade gave Jiraiya when she caught him at the first and only time he peed on her in the hot springs. It got so bad that 3 nearby Jonin ninjas had to stand in and try and save the poor fool and stop her from killing him. When they tried to, she then turned on them, in which they were just barely able to hold her off and restrain her, but not without each getting several cuts and bruises from restraining her, since they found that Aim was lethal with a kitchen knife. It took Swan herself to heal the idiot villager, although from what Kurenai heard, the poor fool was unable to eat solid food and now had a phobia of ramen, which was learned when a nurse one time brought ramen for a meal, and after seeing it, he started to scream like a little girl and telling her to take it away, and muttering things like, "I be good, I be quiet, please don't hit me." When word got out at what happened, the villagers wisely decided to keep their opinions about Naruto to themselves, especially around Aim. Even the ninjas that still hated Naruto were too scared of her to say something bad about Naruto in front of her. When Iruka heard about Naruto's death, he had took several weeks of sick leave from the academy that he had stored up, since he had been so distraught at the news and was unable to teach for a while. He spent most of his time at home. Kurenai remembered when she and a few others visited him. They saw how pale he looked from not eating much, as well as black lines under his eyes from not getting enough sleep, and his eyes were also all puffy and red from crying most of the time. Even his place was a mess, with clothes thrown around and dirty dishes left in the sink. It took a while, but with the help of Konoha and some others, they were able to get Iruka out of his funk and back to teaching, although many noticed he still wasn't the same person he used to be, and he refused to talk to anyone about how he really felt for a while. But out of all of Naruto's friends to be affected by his death, Hinata took it the worst, since she was so devastated when she heard that she locked herself in her room for a month and refused to come out even when her father ordered her to. She barely ate, and had it not been for Neji and her sister Hanabi visiting her every day to talk to her and get her to come out or eat a little, she might have starved herself to death. She spent most of her time crying. She had even once attempted to kill herself by cutting her wrists with a kunai. Fortunately, Neji had arrived and found her before she had bled out and bandaged her up and got her to the hospital in time. Soon after Kurenai, Neji and Hanabi were able to talk to her and got her to stop going the path she was continuing on, and that suicide was not the way and to keep living on for Naruto's sake. The only person that was not upset about Naruto's death was Sasuke, where when he heard he simply scoffed and said, "So the dope dead." So what it was bound to happen. I just surprised he lasted as long as he did. Kurenai just scowled, remembering when she first heard him say that she couldn't believe how anyone could be so cold-hearted to say something like that. She even remembered when her friend Yuzuki Yugao, who told her that when she was watching the Uchiha train, she heard him muttering about having to get stronger to kill his brother Itachi, and she heard him mutter angrily about how he was now never going to get the chance to pay the dope back for defeating him and killing him to gain the Mingekyo Sharingan. When Kurenai heard, she remembered how disgusted she was at how the boy would want to gain power in such a heartless and monstrous way. Soon after, they heard that Nami no Kuni was having a funeral there in Naruto's honor, since they knew they would not have one in Konoha. The people of Nami no Kuni invited the entire Wasabi clan from Cha no Kuni, Lady Daimyo Koyuki of Haruyuki no Kuni, Shibuki leader of Takagakure, Kazukage Sabaku no Gar, and his brother Kankuro and sister Tamari. Swan had even planned to go herself as well as most of the others. But before they could, they received a letter from Nami no Kuni, stating that anyone from Konoha was forbidden to come to the funeral, and if any tried to come, they would be thrown out of the country by force. Not wanting to cause an incident, Tsunade cancelled the plans to go to the funeral. Kurenai sadly remembered when Shizune and Neji both told her that Hinata and Tsunade both cried themselves to sleep at not being able to properly say goodbye to Naruto again. Soon after Naruto's funeral, Danzo played another one of his cards, and got the council to allow his root division to be reactivated. Tsunade tried to overrule them, but Koharu played her own card, by playing the card that Tsunade had used to stop the celebrations of Naruto banishment, where it stated in the Wartime Emergency Act that during a wartime emergency all military resources are be reactivated in the defense of the village, and since the Akatsuki were still a major threat to the village, with the possibility of them having extracted the Kyuubi from Naruto, all the resources of Konoha should be used to deal with them, as well as the threat of Orochimaru. Hence Swan was overruled, and Danzo's root division had been reactivated and under his command. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.